I don't care who you think you are. You are disturbing the peace of my elite passengers. Get your bag, get out of that seat and march to the back, or I will have federal marshals drag you off this tarmac." "You're making a mistake, Ms. Whitman. A mistake that costs more than a ticket." "Go on, boy. The cargo hold is waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, we are turning the plane around." The scent of the first-class cabin was usually a blend of expensive leather, conditioned air, and the subtle metallic tang of exclusivity. For Griffin Devereaux, it was a scent that usually signaled the beginning of a peaceful transition between his headquarters in New York and his expansion projects in Zurich. Today, however, the air inside Flight 404 to London smelled entirely of disrespect. Griffin stood in the aisle, his frame filling the space, though he made every effort to appear non-threatening. He wore a bespoke suit cut from midnight blue vicuña wool, tailored to perfection on Savile Row, a garment that cost more than the annual salary of the flight attendant currently blocking his path. But to Blair Whitman, the chief purser of the flight, the suit didn't matter. The Patek Philippe on his wrist didn't matter. All she saw was a black man standing in seat 1A, a seat she had mentally promised to someone else. "Sir," Blair said, her voice pitched in that professional soprano that feigned politeness while dripping with condescension, "I need you to step out of the aisle. You're blocking the boarding process." Griffin held his ground, his posture relaxed but rooted like an oak. He held up his boarding pass, the digital code crisp on his phone screen. "I'm not blocking anything, Ms. Whitman. I'm trying to sit in the seat I paid for. 1A, as you can see." Blair didn't even look at the phone. She smoothed the front of her Navy uniform, her eyes flicking over Griffin's shoulder to the entryway of the plane where a commotion was brewing. "There has been a system error, a double booking, and given the status of the other passenger—" "Status?" Griffin cut in, his brow arching. He hadn't raised his voice, not by a decibel. In the boardroom, Griffin was known as the silencer. He didn't scream. He simply subtracted the noise until his opponent suffocated in the quiet. "I hold a diamond key status with this airline. I bought this ticket 3 weeks ago. Full fare. There is no double booking unless you manually created one." Blair's smile tightened into a grimace. "The system glitched. We have a priority passenger, a legacy flyer." At that moment, the legacy arrived. Nathaniel Armitage swept into the cabin as if he were parting the Red Sea. He was a man of soft edges and loud fabrics, wearing a linen blazer that was too casual for the weather and loafers that cost a fortune, but looked like slippers. He was accompanied by a cloud of expensive Scotch fumes and an air of unearned victory. "Blair, darling," Nathaniel boomed, ignoring Griffin entirely as he dropped a heavy leather weekender bag onto the floor, nearly hitting Griffin's shin. "Tell me you have the champagne chilled. My driver was an absolute snail. I need to wash the city off me." Blair's demeanor transformed instantly. The ice melted into a syrupy, fawning warmth. "Mr. Armitage, of course. We have the Dom Perignon 2012 open just for you." She turned back to Griffin, her face hardening instantly as if a shutter had dropped. "Sir, you need to move, now." Griffin looked at Nathaniel, then at Blair. He recognized Nathaniel Armitage. The man was the fail son of the Armitage Steel Dynasty, a company that had been hemorrhaging money for a decade, kept alive only by government subsidies and legacy contracts. Griffin, on the other hand, was the CEO of Devereaux Dynamics, a global logistics and tech conglomerate that had quietly acquired 3 of Armitage's subsidiaries in the last fiscal quarter. Nathaniel just didn't know it yet. "Mr. Armitage," Griffin said smoothly, "I believe you're eyeing my seat." Nathaniel finally looked at Griffin. It was a look of genuine confusion, as if a piece of luggage had started speaking to him. He squinted, a sneer tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Your seat? Don't be ridiculous. I sit in 1A. I always sit in 1A. My grandfather practically built this airline." He waved a hand dismissively at Blair. "Blair, why is this, individual harassing me. He was just leaving, Mr. Armitage, Blair said, stepping physically between the two men, her back to Nathaniel, facing Griffin. She dropped the facade of customer service. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Listen to me closely. You are causing a scene. We have an open seat in Economy Plus. It has extra leg room. You will take it, and we will issue you a travel voucher for the difference. Or I will call the captain and have you deemed a security threat. Griffin felt the heat rise up his neck, a primal reaction, but he clamped it down with the sheer force of his will. He looked around the cabin. Other passengers, wealthy tourists, tired businessmen, were watching. Some looked sympathetic, others looked annoyed that the trouble was delaying their pre-flight drink. You are threatening to remove me for being a security threat because I want the seat I paid for? Griffin clarified, pulling out his phone. He tapped the record button on the voice memo app, holding it subtly at his side. I am checking your tone, Blair lied, her eyes flashing. You are being aggressive. Mr. Armitage feels threatened. I feel terrified, Nathaniel drawled, already settling into seat 1B, effectively claiming the entire row. He looks unstable, Blair. Get him out of here. Griffin looked at the seat, 1A. It wasn't about the comfort. It was about the contract. A ticket is a contract. A society functions on contracts. When you tear them up because of how someone looks or who their grandfather was, you aren't just breaking a rule. You're breaking the world. Fine, Griffin said. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Blair blinked, surprised by the sudden capitulation. Excuse me? I said fine, Griffin repeated, pocketing his phone. I will take the seat in the back, but I want it noted on the manifest that I was involuntarily downgraded to accommodate Mr. Armitage. I'll note that you were uncooperative, Blair snapped, handing him a crumpled boarding pass she had evidently already printed. Row 34, window. Enjoy the view. Griffin took the pass. He didn't look at Nathaniel, who was already laughing at something on his phone, oblivious to the titan he had just displaced. Griffin turned and began the long walk down the aisle, past the lie-flat beds, past the premium economy dividers, crossing the invisible border into the cramped, chaotic world of economy. He didn't know it yet, but that walk was the most expensive journey Nathaniel Armitage and the airline would ever pay for. The atmosphere changed physically as Griffin crossed the curtain. The air grew warmer, stickier. The smell of high-end leather was replaced by the scent of sanitizer, stale coffee, and humanity packed too tight. Row 34 was not Economy Plus. It was the second-to-last row of the aircraft, directly in front of the lavatories. The window seat, 34A, was misaligned, meaning there was no window, just a gray plastic wall and the curvature of the fuselage pressing against his left shoulder. The seat did not recline. Griffin folded his 6'2" frame into the space, his knees pressed firmly into the hard plastic back of seat 33A. The passenger in front of him, a teenager with oversized headphones, immediately slammed his seat back in an attempt to recline, crushing Griffin's patella. Griffin didn't flinch. He didn't complain. He breathed in, closed his eyes for 3 seconds, and exhaled. When he opened his eyes, the anger was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. He was no longer a passenger. He was a shark in a bathtub. He pulled out his phone. The plane was still at the gate, the door just closing. He had signal. He opened his secure messaging app and found the contact labeled Theodora Hale. Theodora was not just his executive assistant. She was his chief legal counsel and widely regarded as the queen of kill zones in the corporate legal world. She slept 4 hours a night and ate litigation for breakfast. Griffin, I need the current valuation of Horizon Air. Immediate. 3 seconds later, the typing bubble appeared. Theodora, 1.2 billion market cap. Stock is trading at $14.50. Why? Did they lose your luggage again? Griffin, they lost their minds. I'm in seat 34A. Nathaniel Armitage is in my seat. 1A. Chief Purser Blair Whitman facilitated the move under threat of federal marshals. There was a pause on the other end. A long pause. Griffin could almost hear the sound of Theodora cracking her knuckles 3,000 miles away. Theodora. Armitage. The man is leveraged to the hilt. And Horizon. Griffin. Horizon has a liquidity meeting next Tuesday. They're vulnerable. We own 4% of their stock through our venture arm, acquired in that bundle deal last year. Griffin. Buy it. Theodora. Buy what? Griffin. Everything available. Trigger the hostile clause in the Omni Agreement. Call Cassian Beaumont at Vanguard. Tell him I'm calling in the favor from the Tokyo deal. I want a controlling interest or at least a blocking position effective immediately. I want a board meeting called within the hour. Theodora. Griffin, that's a nuclear option. It'll cost us $300 million in liquid assets just to shake the tree. Griffin. Do it. And Theodora? Get me the flight manifest and the crew roster. I want to know who the captain is. Griffin watched the message sent checkmark turn blue. He looked up. The fastened seatbelt sign pinged on. The plane lurched backward. The pushback had begun. From the back of the plane, the noise was deafening. The hydraulic whine of the cargo doors closing, the crying of a baby 3 rows up, the flushing of the toilet behind him. It was a cacophony of discomfort. Blair Whitman walked down the aisle, doing her final cabin check. She walked with the swagger of a prison warden. When she reached row 34, she didn't even look at Griffin. She looked through him, checking the overhead bin latch above his head. Bag all the way under, sir, she said to the air, not making eye contact. Griffin pushed his briefcase 2 millimeters forward with his foot. Ms. Whitman, he said. His voice was low, carrying over the hum of the engines. She paused, looking down her nose. Yes? I hope you aren't going to complain about the seat. We've already left the gate. I'm not complaining, Griffin said, holding her gaze. His eyes were dark, unreadable obsidian. I'm just checking the time. 10:14 a.m. So? So, Griffin said, a small, terrifying smile touching his lips. I want to make sure the timestamp is correct for the official record. You do that? She scoffed, turning on her heel and marching back toward the sanctuary of first class. Griffin looked back at his phone. Theodora had sent a PDF document. Theodora, it's done. We triggered the liquidity clause. We just bought 14% of the outstanding shares in a dark pool transaction, and combined with our existing holdings and Cassian's proxy votes, you effectively control 51% of the voting rights as of 10:15 a.m. You are the majority shareholder of Horizon Air. Griffin looked at the screen. He owned the seat he was sitting in. He owned the seat Nathaniel was sitting in. He owned the uniform on Blair's back. He owned the engines spooling up on the wings. Griffin. Who is the pilot? Theodora. Captain Holland Quinn. Seniority number 4. He's 2 years from retirement, chuck pension. Clean record, but he's currently in a wage dispute with the airline's board. Griffin's smile widened. A wage dispute. Perfect. Griffin. Connect me to the cockpit. Theodora. I can't patch you into the radio, Griffin. Griffin. No. Call operations. Tell them the new chairman of the board is on Flight 404 and he is declaring an operational emergency. Code Red. Tell them to patch the call through to the satellite phone in the cockpit. Theodora. On it. Give them hell, boss. The plane began to taxi. The safety video started playing on the small, scratched screen in the seat back in front of him. Griffin watched the cartoon plane soar through the clouds. He wasn't going to soar. Not today. The Boeing 777 rumbled down the taxiway, the massive GE-90 engines humming with a deep bass vibration that rattled Griffin's teeth. They were 12th in line for takeoff at JFK. It was a busy morning. Griffin watched the minute hand on his watch. 10:20 a.m., 6 minutes since the text. In the cockpit, Captain Holland Quinn was going through the pre-flight checklist. He was a man of routine. Flaps, check. Slats, check. Hydraulics, check. He was tired. The union negotiations were going nowhere, and the airline was trying to cut his pension by 15%. He just wanted to get to London, sleep in a hotel bed that didn't scream at him, and forget about corporate greed for 12 hours. Suddenly, the SATCOM phone in the center console buzzed. It was a sound they rarely heard during taxi. Usually, it was for medical emergencies or terror threats. Holland exchanged a look with his first officer, a young man named Davis. "Ops?" Davis asked. "Probably telling us we missed a slot," Holland grumbled. He picked up the handset. "Flight 404, Captain Quinn." "Captain Quinn," a voice crackled on the line. It wasn't the usual dispatcher. It was a woman's voice, sharp, articulate, and terrifyingly calm. "This is Theodora Hale, Chief Legal Counsel for the Devereaux Group." Holland frowned. "Operations? Who is this?" "Listen to me very carefully, Captain," Theodora continued. "As of 6 minutes ago, Devereaux Dynamics has acquired a controlling interest in Horizon Air. The board of directors has been suspended pending an emergency review. Mr. Griffin Devereaux is the new acting chairman of the board." Holland laughed, a short, dry bark. "Is this a prank? Davis, is this one of your buddies?" "Captain Quinn." Theodora's voice cut through the laughter like a scalpel. "Check your ACARS system. I just sent a priority text message with the authentication codes. This is not a drill. Mr. Devereaux is currently on board your aircraft." Holland looked down at the flight computer screen. A message was flashing. Priority message, Qui Corp HQ, auth code, Alpha 09XX. The blood drained from Holland's face. Alpha 09 was the code for ownership-level directives. He had never seen it used in 30 years. I see the code," Holland stammered. "Is Mr. Devereaux in first class? Should I go back and greet him?" "No," Theodora said. "Mr. Devereaux is in seat 34A. He was involuntarily downgraded and threatened by your chief purser, Ms. Whitman." Silence in the cockpit. The engines hummed, but the air felt suddenly thin. 34A, Holland repeated. "Economy?" "Correct. Mr. Devereaux has issued his first executive order as chairman." "Which is?" "He wants to speak to you, personally, on the interphone. But he can't come to the cockpit because Ms. Whitman declared him a security threat. You need to call him at his seat. There is a crew handset at row 30. Send the first officer to bring it to him." "Ma'am, we are taxiing for takeoff," Holland argued, sweat forming on his brow. "We are number 5 in line now. I can't just stop the plane." "Captain Quinn," Theodora said, her voice dropping an octave, "you have a wage dispute, correct? You're worried about your pension? Think very carefully about who signs your checks as of this morning. Call him." The line went dead. Holland looked at Davis. "Take the controls. Keep us on the taxiway, but slow down." "Captain?" "Just do it," Holland snapped. He grabbed the cabin interphone. He dialed the station at the back of the plane. In the rear galley, a junior flight attendant picked up. "Captain?" "Bring the handset to seat 34A, Holland ordered. "Immediately." "The passenger?" "Give him the phone!" A moment later, Griffin saw a terrified young flight attendant scrambling over the legs of the passengers in row 33. She held the white plastic phone out to him as if it were a loaded gun. For you, sir. The captain." The entire back section of the plane went quiet. The teenager next to Griffin paused his music. Griffin took the phone. He didn't stand up. He stayed seated, cramped, his knees against the plastic. "This is Griffin." Mr. Devereaux?" Captain Quinn's voice was tinny in the earpiece. "This is Captain Quinn. I've been informed of the situation." "Have you?" Griffin asked calmly. "Then you know that I am currently sitting next to a toilet because your chief purser decided my money wasn't green enough compared to Mr. Armitage's pedigree." "Sir, I assure you I had no knowledge." "I don't care what you knew, Captain. I care about what you do now." "We are moments from takeoff, sir. I can resolve this in London. I will have the authorities meet—" "No," Griffin said. "We aren't going to London, not with this crew, and not with me in this seat. Sir, I can't turn a 777 around on a taxiway without a medical emergency or a mechanical failure. The FAA will have my license. Then let's give you a reason, Griffin said. I am firing the flight crew, effective immediately. A plane cannot legally fly without a cabin crew. Therefore, you are grounded. You're firing them? Now? I am firing Blair Whitman, Griffin corrected, and anyone who stands with her. If you take off, Captain, you are aiding and abetting the kidnapping of the chairman of the board. I will sue you personally for every dime of that pension you're so worried about. Or... Griffin paused. He let the silence stretch. Or, Holland whispered, or you turn this plane around, return to the gate, and help me escort the trash off my aircraft. You do that, and I guarantee your union gets their contract signed by tomorrow morning, with a raise. It was the ultimate leverage. Griffin was buying loyalty with the same checkbook he used to buy the airline. In the cockpit, Holland looked out the window. They were next in line for the runway. The British Airways jet ahead of them began its roll. Holland looked at the throttle. He looked at Davis. He thought about his wife, his mortgage, and the strike that was looming. Then he thought about Blair Whitman, who had been a thorn in his side for 10 years. Arrogant, dismissive, cruel to the junior staff. Holland keyed the mic for the tower. Tower, this is Flight 404. Go ahead, 404, you are hold short, runway 22 right. Tower, 404, we are canceling takeoff clearance. We have a corporate personnel issue. Requesting immediate return to gate. Copy, 404. Is this a medical emergency? Negative, Tower. It's an administrative restructuring. Returning to gate. The plane lurched as Holland hit the brakes and turned the nose wheel hard to the left, exiting the queue. A collective groan went up from the passengers. What's going on? Why are we turning? Griffin handed the phone back to the stunned flight attendant. He adjusted his suit jacket, even though he couldn't stand up. What happened? The teenager next to him asked, pulling off his headphones. Are we broken? Griffin looked at the kid and winked. No, Griffin said. We're just taking out the trash. Up in first class, Nathaniel Armitage spilled his champagne as the plane jerked into a U-turn. What is this incompetency? He shouted. Blair, why are we turning? Blair was already on the phone to the cockpit, her face pale. Captain, why are we turning? She listened for a moment. Her hand went to her throat. She dropped the phone. It swung by its cord, banging against the bulkhead. What did he say? Nathaniel demanded. Blair turned to look at the curtain separating first class from the rest of the world. Her eyes were wide with a dawning horrific realization. He said the new owner of the airline has grounded us. Who is the new owner? Blair didn't answer. She just stared at the aisle, waiting for the monster she had created to come walking back from the deep. The return to the gate was agonizingly slow for everyone except Griffin Devereaux. For him, the hum of the engines was a symphony of realignment. For the other 300 passengers, it was confusion. But for Blair Whitman and Nathaniel Armitage, it was the creeping onset of dread. The aircraft shuddered as the parking brake engaged at gate B14, the very same gate they had left 12 minutes prior. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. Usually this is the moment where people jump up to grab their bags. But no one moved. The captain's voice boomed over the PA system, but it sounded different this time. Harder. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Quinn. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are not disembarking the aircraft. However, we have a security and personnel matter to resolve before we can proceed to London. I ask for your patience. This will only take a moment. The cockpit door opened. Captain Holland Quinn emerged, wearing his hat and full uniform jacket. He didn't look at the first-class passengers. He walked straight past a sputtering Nathaniel Armitage and a frozen Blair Whitman. He marched down the aisle, past business, past economy plus, all the way to row 34. The cabin was silent. Every head turned to watch the captain. When Holland reached row 34, he stopped. He looked at Griffin, who was still wedged against the window. Holland gave a sharp, respectful nod. "Mr. Devereaux," Holland said, his voice carrying in the quiet cabin, "my apologies for the delay and for the accommodation." Griffin unbuckled his seatbelt. "Thank you, Captain Quinn. I assume the jetway is connected?" "It is, sir." Griffin stood up. He smoothed his suit. He picked up his briefcase. The passengers in row 34, 33, and 35 stared with open mouths. The man who had been shoved near the toilet was being addressed like a head of state. "After you, Captain," Griffin said. They walked back up the aisle together. It was a procession. Griffin didn't look left or right at the curious faces. He looked straight ahead at the blue curtain that separated him from his justice. When they breached the curtain into first class, the air was thick with tension. Blair Whitman was standing by the galley, her hands gripping a beverage cart so hard her knuckles were white. Nathaniel Armitage was standing in the aisle, his face flushed red. "Captain!" Nathaniel barked. "This is outrageous. I demand to know why we returned. I have a meeting in London at—" "Sit down, Mr. Armitage," Griffin said. He didn't shout. He simply projected his voice, filling the cabin. Nathaniel spun around. He saw Griffin standing there, flanked by the captain. "You? The stowaway? Captain, why is this man out of his seat?" "Mr. Armitage," Captain Quinn said, stepping forward, "you are speaking to the chairman of the board of Horizon Air." Nathaniel blinked. He laughed, a nervous hacking sound. "What? Don't be absurd. He's nobody." "Check the news, Nathaniel," Griffin said softly. "It just hit the wire." Nathaniel fumbled for his phone. His fingers trembled as he refreshed his news feed. His eyes went wide. Breaking. Devereaux Dynamics acquires controlling stake in Horizon Air. Trading halted. The color drained from Nathaniel's face. He looked from the phone to Griffin, then back to the phone. This is impossible. You can't just buy an airline because you didn't get a seat." "I didn't buy it because I lost a seat," Griffin corrected, stepping closer until he was invading Nathaniel's personal space. "I bought it because your staff seems to have forgotten who keeps this company afloat. It's not legacy passengers who haven't paid full fare in a decade. It's innovators. It's builders." Griffin turned his gaze to Blair Whitman. She was trembling. The veneer of the untouchable chief purser had cracked, revealing a terrified bully beneath. "Ms. Whitman," Griffin said, "do you remember the policy you cited? The one about the security threat?" "Sir, Blair's voice failed her. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Devereaux, I was merely following protocol regarding conflict de-escalation. I had no idea—" "That I was rich?" Griffin finished for her. "So, if I were a school teacher or a nurse or a soldier, your behavior would have been acceptable? Is that your defense? That you only treat poor people like garbage?" Blair opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "You're fired," Griffin said. The words were simple, flat, and absolute. You can't," she whispered. "I have seniority. I have the union." "The union," Griffin said, looking at Captain Quinn, "is currently negotiating a new contract, a contract I will be personally reviewing. I imagine they won't want to waste their political capital defending a purser who racially profiled the chairman." Blair flinched as if slapped. "I didn't. It wasn't race. It was—" "Get your bag," Griffin interrupted. "Get off my plane." "Now," she gasped. "Right now. And take him with you." Griffin pointed at Nathaniel. Nathaniel bristled, trying to regain his composure. "You can't kick me off. I have a valid ticket. I am an Armitage." "And this is a private business," Griffin said. "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Isn't that what you said, Ms. Whitman? I believe Mr. Armitage is causing a disturbance. He is a security threat to the emotional well-being of the crew." "This is insane," Nathaniel shouted. "I will sue you. I will bury you." "You can try," Griffin said, stepping aside to clear the path to the door. "But I'd save your money for a lawyer, Nathaniel. I hear Armitage Steel is missing its Q3 projections. It would be a shame if the bank called in your loans." Nathaniel froze. That was a secret. A deep secret. How did Griffin know? Griffin smiled. I know everything, Nathaniel. Now walk. Nathaniel grabbed his bag, his face a mask of humiliation. He stormed past Griffin, bumping his shoulder. This isn't over, he hissed. It never started, Griffin replied. Blair was slower. She unpinned her wings, the gold wings she had worn for 15 years, and placed them on the counter. She was crying now, ugly, mascara-stained tears. She walked past the passengers she had sneered at earlier. They didn't look at her with sympathy. They looked at her with the cold curiosity of people watching a car wreck. As she stepped onto the jetway, Griffin turned to the rest of the crew who were huddled in the galley, terrified. Who is next in command? Griffin asked. A young woman, the one who had brought him the phone, raised her hand tentatively. Her name tag read Sarah. Sarah, Griffin said, his voice softening, you are now acting chief purser for this flight. Do you think you can manage the cabin without treating paying customers like cattle? Yes, sir, she squeaked. Good. Captain Quinn, are we cleared to return to the runway? We just need a new slot, sir. Maybe 20 minutes. Make it 10, Griffin said. And Captain, move my bag back to seat 1A. The flight to London was the smoothest of Griffin's life. He sat in 1A. The seat was comfortable, but the victory was sweeter. Sarah, the new purser, served him with a level of attentiveness that bordered on worship. She wasn't doing it out of fear exactly. She was doing it because she had seen him dismantle a tyrant. But Griffin wasn't celebrating. He was working. He had his laptop open. The Wi-Fi on the plane was expensive, but he owned the provider now, so it didn't matter. He was on a secure video call with Theodora and Cassian Beaumont. Cassian was in Tokyo, looking impeccably disheveled in a silk robe. You bought an airline, Griffin? Really? I step away for sushi and you buy a fleet of Boeings? It was necessary, Griffin said, sipping sparkling water. It's messy, Theodora countered, her face filling the other half of the screen. She looked tired. The press is going wild. Billionaire throws tantrum, buys airline. The optics are split. Half the internet thinks you're a hero, the other half thinks you're a megalomaniac. What's the stock doing? Griffin asked. It halted, Theodora said. But pre-market indicators for tomorrow are wild. Volatility is through the roof. But here's the kicker. The Flight Attendants Union just released a statement. They're backing you. Apparently, Blair Whitman was unpopular. They're calling her removal a necessary culture correction. Good, Griffin said. What about Armitage? That's the problem, Cassian said, his voice turning serious. Nathaniel is an idiot, but his father, old man Silas Armitage, he's a viper. He's calling for a board inquiry. He claims you manipulated the stock price by creating an artificial emergency on the plane. I grounded the plane for safety, Griffin said calmly. The crew was compromised. Legally, it's a gray area, Theodora warned. If they can prove you planned this, that you provoked the incident to tank the stock or justify the takeover, the SEC will be all over us. Did you know Armitage was going to be on that flight? Griffin paused. I knew he flew this route on Mondays. I didn't know he would take my seat. Can you prove that? Theodora asked. The recording, Griffin said. I recorded the interaction with Blair. It proves she escalated it, not me. It proves the double booking was fabricated. Send it to me, Theodora said. I'll leak it if we need to. But Griffin, watch your back in London. Silas Armitage has friends at Heathrow, and he has friends in the tabloids. Griffin looked out the window. The clouds were a carpet of white beneath him. Let them come. I'm not just a passenger anymore. I'm the pilot. The rest of the flight was a blur of strategy. By the time the wheels touched down at Heathrow, Griffin had drafted a restructuring plan for Horizon Air, approved a new pay scale for the pilots, and outlined a PR strategy titled The New Horizon, Respect at Every Altitude. But as the plane taxied to the gate, Griffin saw something that made his stomach tighten. Police cars, 4 of them. Their blue lights flashing against the gray London rain. They were surrounding the jet bridge. "Captain," Griffin called out as Quinn emerged from the cockpit. "Are those for me?" Quinn looked out the window. He looked pale again. Tower says they have a warrant for endangerment of an aircraft and hijacking." Griffin closed his laptop. Silas Armitage played fast. "Hijacking?" Griffin laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Because I told you to turn around? It's a serious charge, sir. Even if it's bogus, they can hold you for 24 hours without bail." Griffin stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "Sarah," he called to the new purser. "Yes, Mr. Devereaux?" "Open the door. Let them in." Griffin grabbed his bag. He wasn't going to be dragged off. He was going to walk off. The interrogation room at Heathrow was less a room and more a concrete box with a table bolted to the floor. Griffin sat on a metal chair, his hands resting calmly on the table. He had been there for 3 hours. Across from him sat Detective Inspector Gareth Lewis, a man who looked like he had been carved out of roast beef and cynicism. "Let's go over it again, Mr. Devereaux," Lewis sighed, flipping through a file. "You ordered the captain to ground the plane." "I requested the captain return to the gate to deal with a personnel issue," Griffin corrected, "and you used your newfound financial leverage to encourage his compliance." "I informed him of the change in ownership. That is material information for the pilot in command." Lewis leaned forward. "Mr. Armitage, the elder Mr. Armitage, claims you orchestrated this entire event. He claims you hired an actor to hack the booking system, create the double booking, and stage the confrontation to create a viral moment that would allow you to hostile take over the airline and humiliate his son." Griffin blinked. It was so absurd it was almost brilliant. "That's a fantasy." "Is it?" Lewis slid a photo across the table. It was a grainy surveillance photo from the airport terminal in New York. It showed Griffin standing near a coffee kiosk. Talking to him was a woman. "Do you know this woman?" Lewis asked. Griffin looked closely. "No. I was buying an espresso." "This woman," Lewis tapped the photo, "is an ex-flight attendant named Veronica Miller. She was fired from Horizon Air 3 years ago by Blair Whitman. She now works as a freelance consultant. We found a transfer of $50,000 from a shell company linked to Devereaux Dynamics to her account 2 days ago." Griffin's blood ran cold. He hadn't sent any money. He didn't know Veronica Miller. "I didn't send that money," Griffin said, his voice hard. "The transfer code matches your personal office IP address," Lewis said. "Mr. Devereaux, it looks like you paid someone to hack the system and ensure Nathaniel Armitage was double-booked into your seat. That's corporate sabotage. That's fraud. And doing it on an active aircraft? That's endangerment." Griffin sat back. He was being framed. But by whom? Silas Armitage wasn't smart enough to fake a wire transfer from Griffin's own IP. Then it hit him. The timing, the liquidity, the promptness of the acquisition. Cassian Beaumont, his friend, the man who had encouraged the deal, the man who held the proxy votes that tipped the scale to 51%. If Griffin went down for fraud, the shares would be frozen. The board would need an interim leader, someone neutral, someone like Cassian. Griffin realized with a sick, sinking feeling that the karma wasn't hitting the bad guys yet. It was coming for him. He had been so arrogant, so quick to use his power to crush an ant, that he hadn't noticed the trap door beneath his own feet. "I want my lawyer," Griffin said. "She's on her way," Lewis said, standing up. "But until she gets here, you're guests of His Majesty." The door clanged shut. Griffin was alone. He closed his eyes and replayed the last 24 hours. The look on Blair's face, the laughter of Nathaniel. It had felt so good to crush them, but revenge, he realized, was blinding. He had been looking at the pawn, Blair, and the knight, Nathaniel, and he had missed the queen moving across the board. The door opened again, but it wasn't a lawyer. It was Nathaniel Armitage. He was holding a visitor's pass and smiling, a cruel, jagged smile. "Hello, Griffin," Nathaniel said, leaning against the doorframe. "My father pulls a lot of strings in this country. He got me 5 minutes." "You look terrible, Nathaniel," Griffin said. "I look like a victim," Nathaniel corrected. "The poor heir bullied by the corporate raider. The press loves it. They're already calling you the Sky Tyrant." "Enjoy the news cycle," Griffin said. "It won't last." "Oh, it will," Nathaniel whispered. "Because here's the twist, Griffin. I didn't take your seat by accident. We knew you were flying today. We knew you were buying shares. We needed you to overreact. We needed you to do something rash." Griffin stayed silent. The double booking wasn't a mistake. It was bait. "Blair was in on it?" Griffin asked. "Blair? No, she's a useful idiot. We just told the system to flag you as a problem passenger before you even arrived. She just followed her prejudice. We weaponized her racism against you." Nathaniel laughed. "And you fell for it. You bought a failing airline for 20% over market value, and now you're going to prison for fraud. And guess who buys the pieces when you're forced to sell? Armitage Steel." Nathaniel tapped on the glass of the interrogation room. "Enjoy the view, Griffin. No windows in here." He turned to leave. Griffin stared at the metal table. He had been played. He had let his ego drive the plane. But Nathaniel had made one mistake. He had come to gloat, and he had admitted it. Griffin looked at his watch. The Patek Philippe. It was a mechanical watch. No microphone, no recording device. But Griffin smiled. He reached into his suit pocket, which the police had searched, but clearly not well enough, and pulled out a small, flat object. It wasn't a recorder. It was his second phone, the burner he used for high-risk negotiations. The police had taken his main smartphone, but they had missed the slim device in the inner lining of his bespoke jacket. He hadn't recorded Nathaniel, but the line had been open. Theodora Hale, connected 0432. He lifted the phone to his ear. "Did you get that?" Griffin asked. Theodora's voice came through, crystal clear and furious. "Every word. I'm sending the audio file to Detective Lewis and to the BBC. And Griffin?" "Yeah?" "Cassian is in the lobby. He just tried to claim your power of attorney. I'm having security escort him out." Griffin looked at the door where Nathaniel had just exited. The twist had twisted back. "Theodora," Griffin said, leaning back in the metal chair, "get the jet ready. We have a board meeting to attend." The release of Griffin Devereaux from police custody was not a quiet affair. It was a media event. The audio recording of Nathaniel Armitage gloating in the interrogation room had hit the internet like a meteor strike. The hashtag #TheBait was trending globally, overtaking the previous hashtag #SkyTyrant. Griffin walked out of the precinct into a blinding wall of camera flashes. Theodora Hale was at his side, looking like a Valkyrie in a trench coat, using her briefcase to clear a path. "Mr. Devereaux, did you know it was a setup? Is it true you're suing the Armitage family for conspiracy? Are you keeping the airline?" Griffin stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He raised a hand. The crowd quieted. "I was denied a seat," Griffin said, his voice cutting through the damp London air. "Because of that, I bought a company. Today I found out that the denial was a trap designed to exploit my reaction to prejudice. They bet that if they pushed me, I would break." He looked directly into a BBC camera. "They were wrong. I didn't break. I bought the board." He turned and got into the waiting black SUV. Inside the car, the atmosphere was electric. Cassian Beaumont was not there. "Where is he?" Griffin asked, unbuttoning his collar. "Cassian?" Theodora tapped on her tablet. "He's currently on a private jet headed for the Cayman Islands. He knows the recording implicated him, too. The transfer to the consultant came from his accounts, masked as yours. He's running." "Freeze his assets," Griffin said. "Burn him down." "Already done. But we have a bigger problem. The airline. You own it now, Griffin. Really own it. And it's a mess. The stock is yo-yoing. Half the crew is threatening to walk out in solidarity with Blair, who is spinning a narrative that she's a victim of your corporate bullying, and the other half is demanding the raises you promised Captain Quinn. We go to headquarters, Griffin said. Horizon House, London. Griffin, you haven't slept in 30 hours. I can sleep when the trash is taken out. The drive to Horizon House took 40 minutes. When they arrived, the glass and steel building was surrounded by protesters. Some held signs supporting Blair, workers' rights, billionaire egos. Others held signs supporting Griffin, end airline racism. Griffin walked through the front doors, the security guards parting like the Red Sea. He took the elevator to the top floor, the boardroom. Inside, the remaining board members of Horizon Air were sitting around a long mahogany table. They looked like terrified schoolboys waiting for the principal. At the head of the table sat Silas Armitage. Silas was 80 years old, a man made of liver spots and malice. He didn't stand up when Griffin entered. "You have some nerve showing up here," Silas rasped. "You illegally recorded my son. Your son confessed to a conspiracy to commit fraud and entrapment," Theodora said, placing a legal file on the table with a heavy thud. "And you, Silas, are named as a co-conspirator." "You can't prove I knew," Silas sneered. "I don't need to prove it to a judge right now," Griffin said, walking to the head of the table. "I just need to prove it to them." He gestured to the other board members. Griffin pressed a button on the wall, lowering the projection screen. "This," Griffin said, connecting his phone, "is the internal communication log between Blair Whitman and Nathaniel Armitage's executive assistant." The screen lit up. Emails, texts, from N. Armitage office to B. Whitman, private. Subject, Flight 404 directives. Ensure seat 1A is double booked. Flag passenger Devereaux as hostile. If he complains, escalate to removal. Bonus of $50,000 upon completion. The boardroom gasped. Blair hadn't just been prejudiced. She had been a paid mercenary. "She sold her integrity for 50 grand, Griffin said. "And you, Silas, authorized the payment from the family trust." Silas Armitage slammed his hand on the table. "This company is my legacy. You are a tourist here." "Not anymore," Griffin said. "I own 51%. And as chairman, my first motion is the immediate removal of Silas Armitage from the board of directors for gross misconduct and corporate espionage." He looked around the table. "All in favor?" The hands went up, hesitant at first, then all at once. Even Silas's oldest allies raised their hands. They saw the writing on the wall. The Armitage ship was sinking, and Griffin was the only lifeboat. "Motion carried," Griffin said coldly. "Security, please escort Mr. Armitage from the building and take his son's picture off the wall in the lobby on your way out." Silas stood up, shaking. He looked at Griffin with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You've bought a corpse. This airline is bankrupt. We hid the debt. It's rotting from the inside. Then I'll rebuild it," Griffin said. "Now get out." The hard karma that the universe delivered over the next week was swift, brutal, and poetic. The fate of Blair Whitman. The email leak destroyed her victim narrative instantly. The union dropped her defense case within an hour of the news breaking. Horizon Air not only fired her but sued her for breach of contract and damages to the brand. She was blacklisted from every airline carrier in the world. A video surfaced of her being denied entry to a bus because her pass was declined, a small petty irony that the internet devoured. She ended up working retail in a town where nobody flew. The fate of Nathaniel Armitage. The confession tape led to criminal charges, fraud, conspiracy. But the real blow was social. The Armitage name, once a golden ticket in London society, became toxic. The bank called in the loans for Armitage Steel just as Griffin had predicted. Nathaniel was forced to declare personal bankruptcy to pay his legal fees. He was last seen flying commercial economy middle seat to a court hearing in Brussels. The fate of Cassian Beaumont. He didn't make it to the Caymans. Griffin's team had alerted Interpol about the fraudulent wire transfers. His jet was grounded in Bermuda for customs irregularities. He was arrested on the tarmac, wearing his silk robe. But karma works both ways. Griffin sat in his new office at Horizon House. He had won. He had crushed his enemies. But Silas was right about one thing. The airline was rotting. The financials were a disaster. The culture was toxic. Griffin had spent $400 million of his own money to buy a company that was losing $10 million a week. He looked out at the London skyline. He was tired. His own company, Devereaux Dynamics, was suffering because he had been so focused on this vendetta. His stock was down 8%. The door opened. It was Captain Holland Quinn. "Mr. Devereaux?" "Come in, Captain. Or should I say, Chief Pilot Quinn." Griffin had promoted him the day before. Quinn looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the staff, they appreciate the raises, they really do, but..." "But what?" "They're afraid of you." Griffin frowned. "Why?" "I saved them from the Armitages." "You did. But you also grounded a plane and fired a crew in 12 minutes. They think you're just a different kind of tyrant. One with a quicker trigger finger." Griffin leaned back. That was the sting. He had fought to be respected, but he had only achieved being feared. He had become the angry black man the narrative wanted him to be, even if he was right. "What do I do, Holland?" Griffin asked. It was the first time he had asked for advice. "Stop being the king," Holland said. "Be the passenger. You bought the airline to prove a point about how people are treated. So treat them better. Not just with money, with trust." Griffin looked at the empty chair where Silas Armitage used to sit. He realized that holding on to the anger was heavier than the luggage he had carried off the plane. 6 months later. Flight 404 from New York to London was boarding. The cabin looked different. The stiff, aristocratic blues and grays of the Armitage era were gone, replaced by warmer tones, deep terracottas and calming creams. The staff wore new uniforms, designed for comfort and style, not rigid militarism. A young man in a hoodie walked up to the gate. He looked nervous. He was holding an economy ticket. "I'm sorry," the gate agent said, smiling genuinely. "I have to stop you there." The young man flinched. "Is there a problem? I paid for—" "No problem," the agent said. "But we have a new policy, the Devereaux Initiative. Every flight, we randomly upgrade one passenger who is traveling for the first time or for a special occasion." She tapped her screen. "It's your birthday today, isn't it?" The young man blinked. "Yeah, it is." "Happy birthday. You're in 1A. She handed him a new boarding pass. Inside the plane, sitting in seat 1B, was Griffin Devereaux. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and reading a book. He watched the young man come in, eyes wide, touching the leather seat 1A as if it were made of gold. Is this real?" the kid asked. "It is," Griffin said, smiling. "Enjoy the flight." Griffin didn't need the whole row anymore. He didn't need to own the air to feel powerful. The plane took off. As it climbed, Griffin looked down at the city. He had turned the company around. It wasn't just profitable, it was beloved. He had instituted a blind booking system for staff promotions to eliminate bias. He had fired the toxic middle managers. He had built a legacy not on steel, but on dignity. He picked up his glass of water. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Quinn's voice came over the intercom, "we have reached our cruising altitude. The air is smooth up here." Griffin closed his eyes and finally, truly relaxed. Griffin Devereaux didn't just win a fight for a seat. He dismantled a system of entitlement that had stood for generations. He learned that money can buy an airline, but only integrity can earn loyalty. The villains, Blair, Nathaniel, and Silas, lost everything because they believed their status protected them from consequences. They forgot that gravity applies to everyone, but the real victory wasn't the revenge. It was the reconstruction. Griffin realized that true power isn't about grounding planes. It's about lifting people up. He turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of dignity. What would you have done in Griffin's shoes? Would you have taken the vouchers and walked away? Or would you have burned the kingdom down to clear the rot? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the nice guy doesn't finish last. He buys the whole damn race. Thanks for watching, and remember, treat everyone with respect.